Andor Episode 11, Daughter of Ferrix. We start this one off with Cassian and Melshi still attempting to get off Narkina 5 without being detected by the Imperial patrols. Which kind of surprised me, as for some reason I figured they just would have skipped their escape and take them straight already going to Ferrix. So kudos to the writers for sticking this one out and actually showing us how they try and get off the planet. Fortunately, the sequence gets even better because we actually get to see some aliens in this episode, and not just any, but 2 Caridians. Which was pretty neat, as they've only at this point been featured slightly in Rogue One as a background alien, but were more so a popular unit to play in the early days of my favorite Star Wars mobile game, Force Arena. So yeah, you could say this was a pleasant surprise, especially for me. Anyway, both Cassian and Melshi get caught by these 2 after attempting to steal their quadjumper to get off the planet. After a bit of back and forth, the Caridians decide to not call in the bounty on these 2 and instead help them out, as neither of them is really a fan of the Empire anyway. So yeah, it was a nice little comedic scene to start off this episode, not bad at all. Then that all comes crashing down, as on Ferrix we end up learning that Maarva has passed away, leading everyone to start prepping for her funeral, while her droid B struggles to accept the reality of the situation. And I'll be honest here, I didn't exactly like how they decided to already kill off Maarva, as I feel we didn't get to see enough of her, at least in the last several episodes, like her doing something rebellious on Ferrix, for example. We only heard about it, but didn't see it, which seems to be a waste in my opinion, especially with this actress who seems to be doing pretty good in this role. And not only that, but they kill her off screen too, which is super lame. For the amazing writers that this show has, I'm disappointed in how poorly and rushed they handled Maarva. I was really expecting to see and get far more from her character here, and this just isn't enough. Although one part I did like was how it showed both Cinta and Corv spying on Maarva across the street at the bar, with neither of them knowing who the other one is and that they're doing the exact same thing. That's some low-key humor I'll gladly take, at least here. Oh, and did I mention Bix is also pretty messed up in the head and, well, physically too after her Imperial torture? Yeah, she's almost brain dead at this point, and it doesn't seem like she's proving to be much use to the Empire anyway. Although they did leave her response on whether Krieger is Axis or not on a cliffhanger, so I'm curious to see what will happen with that. On Coruscant, Vel arrives to meet with Mon Mothma right after telling Kleya about Maarva's death on Ferrix, only to find Lydia in some sort of strange, religious, cultural, cult-like meeting or something like that. There's really not much here that exactly tells us on what's going on and who all these people are. We kinda have to guess and assume based on what little we do get from this scene, but considering how it all led into a discussion about Chandrilan marriage customs between Mon and Vel, we can only assume this is some sort of pre-marriage ritual, and Mon has already agreed to give her daughter up to Davo, or at the very least Lydia herself found out and is forcing it to happen to spite her mother. I can't say I liked this scene, as aside from it being pretty vague and the dialogue still leaving us guessing on whether Mon agreed to Davo's offer herself or not, or she's, I guess, considering it. It also wastes valuable screen time re-explaining Mon's financial troubles, something that we already know quite well, and hearing about it again for the 3rd time is starting to get grating. I feel they could have had Vel filled in on Mon's situation in a better way than regurgitate everything that we already know, and instead either use the screen time to show new interactions with Mon and Perrin, I suppose, or heck, give us more Cassian and Melshi. There's also later a short scene featuring Syrell, who gets a surprise phone call from the former Sergeant Linus Mosk, who informs him about Maarva's death, with Syrell getting excited over the fact that Cassian now may attend her funeral on Ferrix. giving him a chance to apprehend Cassian himself. Like I said, this is a super short scene, but I surprisingly got pretty happy seeing and hearing from Mosk again. Can't say I saw that coming. I mean, he's not a character I cared all that much for in the first arc, but I don't know. Over time, it did make me curious on what he was up to after losing his job, and yeah, it's good to hear that he's still in positive spirit after what happened, then falling into depression like Syrell did. Plus, I feel like this dude's like your average Joe amongst all these super serious Imperials, so it's kind of refreshing too. Not to mention having Syrell go to Ferrix now, unbeknownst to Dedra, and taking the law into his own hands? Oh boy, I can already tell this is gonna get interesting, and I can't see Dedra being all too happy about this. Especially since it might go against her own plan for having to agree to accept Ferrix's request to get a funeral permit for Maarva. I know she's cooking up something herself here, so Syrell's little plan might interfere with that. Plus, I think there's gonna be some major resolution with Syrell on Ferrix, as so far his subplot has been pretty minuscule with no real payoff. We've kinda just been following him so far, and there's not much going on with his storyline. So maybe, who knows, there's gonna be a big twist where after several corresponding events on Ferrix, instead of catching Cassian, he decides to help him and go against Dedra? Yeah, fat chance I know, but I'm expecting to be surprised here nonetheless. Elsewhere on Segra Milo, Luthen arrives to meet with Saw, who's since changed his mind on the whole Spellhouse mission, as he's now fully on board with helping the Separatist Anto Krieger and his men on the attack. But of course, Luthen now knows that mission is a death trap for Krieger and goes about explaining the whole thing to Saw, in his own way of course. Even leading to a humorous response from Two Tubes, who gets triggered after Luthen suggests that he's secretly spying on Saw for him. And this I liked, it felt like Star Wars comedy to me, which is awesome. Saw also asks Luthen if it had been him instead of Krieger, would Luthen still do the same? With him going like, "You? Oh, no way, you actually somewhat know me, have info on me. Krieger? Yeah, he doesn't even know what I look like, he's expendable." And I also liked how at the same time in all of this, Luthen downplayed the truth a bit as well, lying to Saw that he's only going to sacrifice Krieger and 30 of his men, rather than tell him the whole truth that it's actually 50. He knows Saw was going to struggle hearing this, so yeah, might as well make the truth sting a bit less if anything. And yeah, I think all of the Saw and partisan moments in Andor are pretty solid, and this one is the best yet. But things only get better from here, as after Luthen leaves the planet, he's pulled over by a patrolling Imperial arrestor cruiser, which in itself is pretty sweet as this ship was originally created to appear in Solo, but unfortunately for numerous reasons it never quite made it into the movie, so I'm glad to see it make its live-action debut here. Anyway, despite Luthen having the proper credentials, Captain Elk of the arrestor cruiser and the Imperials still decide to board Luthen's ship, the Fondor, which is something that Luthen can't risk happening, so he in turn surprises Elk's arrestor cruiser by unleashing the Fondor's illegal countermeasure modifications, taking out the cruiser's tractor beam disc that's holding him in position, resulting the Empire to dispatch in response a flight of TIE fighters and a TIE bomber after Luthen. Which, yeah, normally would have been overkill for a simple, defenseless hullcraft. But as we all know quite well, Luthen's Fondor is no average hullcraft, as he surprises not only Elk, but heck, us as the viewers too, as he wipes out all of the Imperial fighters with absolute ease, even pulling out a crazy double laser maneuver to spice things up as well. What else can I say here? This dogfight was the highlight of the episode, even having Elk later shake his head in pure disbelief and disappointment on what he had just witnessed. Sure, the ties all went down pretty quickly, but in their defense, they had no idea what they were going up against. And oh yeah, if this scene didn't convince people that Luthen, despite being just a normal guy, is still a badass, then I don't know what will. Plus, I also really liked hearing Luthen's intense dialogue of Clea about Cassian, all while doing it in code as if they're talking about antiques and whatnot. Nothing but amazing writing right there. Back on Niemos, the space Florida planet where Cassian was originally arrested on, he manages to sneak back into his hotel room and collect all of his stuff that he hid away before. Which actually surprised me, as I didn't expect Cassian to come back to Niemos. I just thought he'd go to Ferrix straight away, broke too of course, but nope. They did the sensible thing that any one of us in his position would do, so nice to see that. Cassian afterwards tries to contact Ferrix to ask about Maarva, only to find out that she's recently passed away. And this being obviously a heartbreaking moment for him, as it's the only closest person he's had as family, which is now gone and he's now on his own. That, and to find out under these circumstances, is never pleasant for anyone, so yeah, gotta feel for Cass here. But if I may add, what was up with this guy Zan, who knows perfectly well that Cassian is a wanted fugitive? The Imperials are likely tapping into Ferrix's communications, not to mention that Cassian also tells him not to say his name out loud. Yet this Dumbo continues calling him Cassian anyway. Like, is he seriously this daft, just looking for trouble, or he doesn't care anymore? Who knows? It was just stupid and annoying to see this, and I would be so angry if I was Cassian. With the news of Maarva still fresh in his mind, Cassian decides to keep it to himself and not tell Melshi. Rather, looking at the ocean sunset as he continues to process everything. And this shot right here is fantastic, as it gives the end of Rogue One, I feel like, kind of a new meaning. At least for Cassian, when he was on the beach gazing at the destruction approaching from the Death Star. As then, that same view of the ocean probably brought him back to finding out about his mother's death. Thinking about Maarva in his final moments and how he'll soon be with her again. Stellar stuff. Now, what got me kind of agitated afterwards was Melshi's conversation with Cassian, on basically asking how many of the prisoners actually they think got out of Narkina 5 alive, as for all they know, it could just only be them too. So Melshi thinks that they need to let people know what the Empire is doing there, suggesting that they split up in order to do that, as it would be safer, and well, I didn't like this at all. I mean, it was bad enough that we barely got any Cassian and Melshi scenes aside from that opener, but now they're removing Melshi from the equation here just left a bad taste in my mouth. As I know now, we won't see him until Season 2, and well, frankly, I think that blows, as I was hoping to see these two build their friendship more. Overall, I think this episode was okay. Aside from the small bits and pieces here and there, I didn't really find myself enjoying this episode all that much. Which really took me by surprise, considering how I've been saying the entire time that Andor only keeps getting better and better with each new episode. Well, not this time, at least for me, and I have no problem calling a spade a spade. And believe me, I know what this episode was going for, sacrifices, showing us how Luthen and Saw are willing to sacrifice Krieger, as well with Mon sacrificing her family, all of them doing so for the good of the rebellion. At least I think that's what the message of this episode was, but this just wasn't it for me. For the most part, I felt that this episode was paced weird. It had a lot of unnecessary moments and wasted time that could have easily been filled better with the adventures of Cassian and Melshi, which again I think would have supremely been a better fit and continuation from the Prison Break arc. As well, you know, build more towards next week's season finale. Yet here? If I didn't know any better and you had just told me that next episode is the final one for Season 1, I wouldn't have believed you. It just really doesn't feel that way, and that's because this did not really feel like a penultimate episode. Yeah, the Luthen parts ultimately saved this episode for me from putting it in the same boring category as the first 2 episodes of Andor. And like I said, while there were some smaller bits that I did very much enjoy here, overall the whole package just seemed underwhelming and not as good as it should have been. At least, again, for a penultimate episode, especially with a team of probably the best writers Star Wars has had since The Empire Strikes Back. I was disappointed with it, plain and simple, but hopefully this was only just a calm before the storm. A bit a not so good one, and that next week's finale hits us with a punch that we'll never forget. And that was my take on this episode of Andor. Let me know what you all thought about the episode in the comments below. And if you haven't already, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.